Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. Today's episode, a nurse with a heart for nurturing the nurse. And today's guest, Cindy Kruse. What's the common thing that you found in your travels, the common struggle that nurses face?
That I feel like is kind of different, and like maybe it was because it was so long ago, but I remember like California was much more like it is now. I think nurses were they were part of the team, and it was nurse led, so we had nurse led rounds, where in New York it was you were kind of told what needed to be done and you weren't really part of the team. So that was one thing I realized when I got to California, especially in San Diego. It was time to do rounds, and I had to present the patient, and I was like, oh, okay. And then the attending was like, and what's your plan? And I was like, oh, well, this. And he's like, okay, then we'll check back in a couple hours and see how that's going. And I was like, oh, I actually have a voice. I actually had, I felt like part of the team, which was a little bit different in New York, where most nurses were like, if it's not in order, I'm not doing it. And you were pretty much told what the plan was, and it was the expectation that you were going to expedite it. So that's one thing that I thought was a little bit different, and something to definitely kind of, if it's not what it's definitely something that you have to adjust to. It wasn't as bad as it is now. Well, no, that's actually not true, because most places that I did go to as a traveling nurse is because of short staffing. And that, again, I feel like is definitely an issue now. I remember when I went to the hospital in New York City, the assignments were so bad that we actually got your assignment, and then you got a form to sign that actually protected your license, because they were aware.
Nurses, are you burnt out, frustrated, looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at thenursesharkacademy.biz today. Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. The mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining the confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Join us and support these wonderful nurse entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's guest is Cindy Kruse, and Cindy is the founder of Nurture the Nurse, a program to guide nurses from burnout to brilliance. So welcome to the show, Cindy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Tina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. This is nurse burnout has been a big topic we've talked about on the show before, but I always like to start off the show with asking this very important question: what made you become a nurse?
It's so funny that you asked. I honestly think I was a nurse from childhood. I remember my sister had a fever, and I immediately grabbed some paper and a pen, and I wrote down what her temperature was, what time we gave her the Tylenol, what time we had to check it again. It was just a fascination with being in the hospital. It was a bizarre thing. I loved going. I loved to go visit people. I've always had a passion of just helping, being that helper person. So yeah, it was an innate thing ever since I was a little girl.
Now, were there nurses or doctors or healthcare professionals in your family?
Nope, not at all. I'm actually one of the first in my family to go to college, so that was a big deal. It was funny because also growing up, I had a fascination with what was inside. So I would take the heads off, the arms off my dolls. And my mom was like, she's either going to be something in the medical field or a serial killer of some sort because and I would always say, don't worry, I just want to see what's inside and I'm going to fix it. I'll fix it, but I just want to see what's inside. And then I remember I wanted to be a pediatric brain surgeon. And then I realized how much schooling it was. And I was like, I don't know if I actually want to do that anymore. And then in conjunction with like a guidance counselor, I remember, and my mother, it was this conversation and he was like, how about being a nurse? And I was like, I never, I was just like, okay, that's in looking at all the things. And I was like, it kind of checked all the boxes. So yeah, so I went to nursing school and it's been really truly like a joy for 28 years. I started off, I did 2 years of Gen Peds, and then the rest of the time has been in the pediatric ICU.
Okay. Well, now, so where did you decide to go to school? This is because I always want to hear how you decided to get to the school that you're going to
Mhm.
or went to.
Um, Out of high school, so I grew up in New York. I'm currently transplanted to Chicago. But when I went to school in a little town called Ossining, New York, and high school. And then when I talked to my guidance counselor, he was like, nursing, and I was like, sounds like I want that. Like that's like I said, it checks all the boxes. And I went to the College of Mount St. Vincent in the Bronx. I did a 4-year program there. And then, yeah, I did 2 years of general pediatrics, 3 years of pediatric ICU in New York. And then I was a traveling nurse for 5 years. So I did San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Indianapolis, Phoenix. In the interim, I also did medical missions in El Salvador and the Dominican Republic doing post op open hearts.
So you've
So
had
I,
a variety of things.
yeah.
And so, what made you decide to become a travel nurse? Because I know a lot of nurses during the pandemic decided to become travelers.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, the economic incentives was there, but you were traveling before the pandemic and all that. So, what made you want to be
Yeah.
a travel nurse?
It was one of those things that I felt it's weird. I don't know if you've ever felt this, but I felt like I outgrew my space, and
Hmm.
I was like, okay, there's got to be there's more out there, and I just didn't know where I wanted to live or what I wanted to do, and it was like, well, if I can travel the country on somebody else's dime and do what I love, then there you go. That was perfect. I did wind up meeting my husband to be while I was in Indianapolis. He was from Chicago, and I wound up coming to visit a friend here and met him. Um, and I still did. We did the long distance thing for a little bit, but yeah, once we got married and settled down, he was like, "Okay, you're kind of done now," because we wanted to have kids. So, but it was funny because during the pandemic, um, it was like a financial thing, and I was like, hey, I could go away for 3 months and make a really like a big chunk of money. And he was like, no, I need you. I need you here, and I need you. The kids need you. So didn't wind up doing it. But initially, it was one of those things where, and I tell that to travelers too. I feel like you're either looking for something or running from something, and I was just
Mhm.
looking for where home was going to be.
Well, I think the opportunities that are out there. So if you're not settled in, you're not, tied to your community and you want to explore, I think traveling is probably something that would interest a lot of people. And it's something
Mhm.
I considered until I got married.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And yeah. And then I was like, no, I want to focus on my community. That's when I got really involved in my community.
Hmm.
And I discovered that there's a lot to do right where I am. And so that's how I
Hmm.
got really involved in several boards and associations and into a lot of stuff. And it's interesting because once people find out you're a nurse, they're like, oh,
Hmm.
we need you. We need you for this.
Hmm.
We need you for that. So I think that's great. But you've had your chance to see a lot of different places. And thanks for coming to good old Indianapolis.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was so funny because it was, and again, I really truly believe in the universe kind of puts you, what's for you won't pass you, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I was actually in New York, I went back to New York on a travel assignment, and I was like, okay, I'm going to stay here because you can stay for a minimum of 3 months and up to a year, and then you either have to sign on as staff or go elsewhere. And most of my assignments I was doing were like 6 month clips. Um, but I had an amazing. The company put me up in a dorm in a one bedroom doorman building in New York, 10 blocks from Times Square. And I
Oh
was like,
wow.
oh, I'm going to stay here for the whole year.
Hmm.
6 months into it, though, the hospital signed sole contracts with my competitor company. So they were either like, you have to, once you finish your assignment, you either have to switch over to the other company or you have to leave. And I was like, you know what? I've been with my company for a while, and I was very loyal. So I was like, you know what? And I called her and I was like to my recruiter, where, and that's all I said, where's the biggest bonus? And she was like, Indianapolis. And I actually was like, I don't even know where that is, but let's go. We'll just, take the adventure and wind up going. So yeah, so when I was in Indianapolis is when um, I had called. Actually, she was another nurse friend that I had met on my first assignment in San Diego, and she happened to be in Chicago. And when I came up here, I was like, oh, "This is it. This is home. This is like a clean New York with nice people, and it's still neighborhoody." And now it's been, wow, I've been in Chicago now 20 years. So
So
yeah.
what? So what is it like? Just for people to know,
Mm-hmm.
because I do have some international people who listen to the show.
Uh-huh.
Um, so what was it like for going from New York to Chicago? Because they're both big cities,
Mm-hmm.
but the culture I think is a little bit different because I've been in both places. So.
Mm-hmm. New York and Chicago wasn't that different. New York, because initially it was New York to San Diego.
Mhm.
That was very different. That was very, very different. And I really had to. It opened my eyes to people in New York. I feel have like tunnel vision. It's like they just think that New York is the only place that exists. And then once you venture out, and it's always very fast paced, right? Everybody's
Yes.
always in a hurry, always in a rush. And then you go to San Diego and it's completely different. There's, everybody's more laid back, no worries became like the thing. It was like, oh, no worries. And I grew a lot more patient, which was beautiful. Um, and yeah, so that there was a little bit of culture shock there. But New York to Chicago, not terribly different. Again, it's cleaner.
Yeah.
It's cleaner in Chicago. It's cleaner in Chicago, and I think people are a little nicer.
Well, one of the funniest things when I came to school in Indiana was the whole saying hi to people you just saw like 2 seconds ago.
Hmm.
And I'm from Toledo, bigger
Okay.
city. So I went to very small upland Indiana. So, when we got the first actual stop, light that goes red, green, and yellow, it was like, whoo, big deal, right? So I'm at college and I'm passing by these people and they're like, hello. And I'm like, hello. And I keep, you keep going. Well, they passed me again and they're like, hello. And I'm like, I just saw you 5 minutes ago. I said hello. But they were so offended if I didn't say hello back.
Hmm.
And it was like, okay, so I learned how to do the whole slow hello, thing like that. It's just too funny. So going fast forward, I go to New York. I've been in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest, been around, all this time. And I go to the grocery store and I'm like, hey, how you doing? How we do in the Midwest? You're gonna say hello to you. We're gonna have a
Yeah.
conversation while you're checking me out. And they were looking at me like, why are you talking to me? Next person in line.
Yeah.
And so by the time I finished my time in New York, I was back into that whole, okay, let's move it along. Let's get going. It's just really
That's
funny.
so
Some of
funny.
those differences.
Oh yeah, it's definitely different. That's one thing. I think I've always been that person that you make eye contact with me, I'll acknowledge you.
Hmm.
Right. So even in New York, when people would look at, I would smile or say hello or how are and
Yeah.
that was never the norm. You would always kind of get the funny looks. It's funny now too though, because sometimes in the morning, because I do work night shifts still,
Hmm.
which I will never ever do days. Um, but yeah, even in the morning when I'm leaving and people pass, whether you say hi to me or not, you'll always get a good morning, good morning, good morning as I pass by. So yeah, that's definitely a Midwest trait, I feel.
Well, it's so interesting because when I grew up, if you don't know a person, you would acknowledge them, but you would acknowledge them with a look. So it's a kind of like a
Mhm.
hey.
Yeah.
that type of thing. And it was that would suffice. But when I came to Indiana, it was like, you had better speak or you were very rude.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that. Because I wasn't used to that. I was like, we don't, talk to strangers, you don't make eye
Right.
contact with certain people, if you didn't know what they were doing. And it was just really different. And so I just find that interesting that you've been around in so many different places and you've seen healthcare from different regions. What's the common thing that you found in your travels, the common struggle that nurses face?
That I feel like is very is kind of different. And like maybe it was because it was so long ago, but I remember like or California. California was much more like it is now. I think nurses were um, they were part of the team,
Hmm.
and it was nurse led. So we had nurse led rounds. Where in New York, it was you were kind of told what needed to be done, and you weren't really part of the team. So that was one thing I realized when I got to California, especially in San Diego. We were, it was time to do rounds, and I had to present the patient, and I was like, oh, okay. And then the attending was like, and what's your plan? And I was like, oh, well, this. And he's like, okay, then we'll check back in a couple hours and see how that's going. And I was like, oh, I actually have a voice.
Hmm.
I actually had, I felt like part of the team, um, which was a little bit different in New York, where most nurses were like, if it's not in order, I'm not doing it.
Hmm.
um and you were pretty much told what the plan was, and it was the expectation that you were going to expedite it. So that's one thing that I thought was a little bit different, um and something to definitely kind of I mean, if it's not what it's definitely something that you have to adjust to. um it wasn't as bad as it is now. Well, no, that's actually not true, because most places that I did go to as a traveling nurse is because of short staffing.
Hmm.
And that, again, I feel like is definitely an issue now. I remember when I went to the hospital in New York City. The assignments were so bad that we actually got your assignment, and then you got a form to sign that actually protected your license, because they were aware.
Wow.
Yes, they were aware that it was an unsafe assignment. So you had to sign this form in order to protect your license in the event that something occurred. That was frightening to me. Um, I don't know if it's as bad now. I mean, I know in my facility now we have had like big turnover. Our turnover rate is pretty high. But I don't know if that's also just in pediatrics, like in pediatric intensive care, because
Hmm.
I feel like that's not for everyone. Um, and we just recently had about 6 girls leave in the last 2 months, and they it hadn't even been there 2 years.
Mm.
Some of them had just gotten off orientation, and again, it is like it's a difficult unit, um, to have longevity in, I think.
Now, how long had those nurses been in nursing before they left your unit? I'm just curious. I mean, were they seasoned nurses or were they newbies?
Oh, brand new,
Brand
yeah.
new. Hmm.
Hmm. I don't think that they weren't getting the support that they needed, like just the emotional support. I think is big, and I what I see is happening is it has to be sought out. And I think as nurses, we consider ourselves as the helpers and the healers,
Hmm.
so we don't seek help.
Right.
There's whether it's the stigma behind it, but also, and that's where I feel like that there needs to be that shift. There's a disconnect now with hospitals, because some hospitals do offer amazing programs. Again, they have to be sought out, and
Hmm.
it's in the eye of, I don't want to say mental illness, but it's not in preserving your mental wellness. So it's
Right.
not giving you tools or perspectives to preemptively help you in a situation, or even debriefing. I don't feel like that. Our unit does a really good job of debriefing. Um, but just that, the extra added practices that would really help regulate your nervous system, which is a lot of the reasons that many leave because they don't have those practices and they don't know how to deal with the anxiety or the depression or the overwhelm or the stress that comes along with the job. Um, so I feel like if that was offered preemptively or even taught in a class, like there's so much that I feel is not taught in nursing school in that aspect.
You know, there's so much that we have to know and learn in nursing
Mhm.
school. It's sometimes difficult for those, I hate to say it, but those niceties, which are so
Mhm.
essential, but we kind of gloss over it.
Mhm.
Um, Mental health is one of those areas where you may have a rotation there, but it's just hitting the surface. And
Mhm.
I think we kind of feel like, okay, well, you're going to go work your job and they're going to teach you. And then they're like, no, we don't have time to teach you. We need you to be up and running and ready to go. And so it creates this vicious cycle. And
Right.
so that's one of the reasons why I talk to the students, because I'm like, hey, you've got to protect your license. You've got to protect yourself. You've got to know your Nurse Practice Act. There's some
Mhm.
things that they're not going to tell you in nursing school that you're going to need to know once you hit that door, because you are on your own. I hate to say it that way, but you're responsible for your own license, and your defense can't be, this is my legal nurse consulting hat popping on, but your defense can't be, well, I didn't know.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah. And that and there's a case recently where the um, a patient, a resident in a long-term care facility, went missing on night shift. The night shift nurse, pretty new, I think she was agency, she was
Mhm.
over 60 residents,
Oh my.
noticed that she wasn't in her room. So this is on, like, the evening going into nights, and she's like, well, she must be, with her family, but there's nobody signed her out.
Mm.
Didn't really look for this woman, but didn't really do anything about it. So she tells the day shift nurse, "Oh, by the way, Mrs. Smith is missing. We haven't seen her since yesterday." And she's like, "Wait, what?" So then she calls police, do all this stuff. The woman was outside
Oh.
on the patio and froze to death.
Oh my goodness.
And in the article, it says that the nurse was like, "Well, I didn't know what to do." I'm like, you
That,
didn't think to
yeah.
call the administrator, call the DON,
Something.
um,
Yeah.
call
Let somebody know.
your work bestie. Hey, you've been here longer. What should I do? I
Yeah.
like, what do you mean you didn't know what to do? Yeah,
Wow. That's so unfortunate. Yeah.
it is. And this nurse is possibly going to have criminal charges against her, lose her license, everything she worked
Mhm.
for, gone.
Mhm.
And it's sad. It's sad for that woman, but it's also sad for that nurse. And I'm like, there's got to be something we need to do better. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I want our nurses to really think about what they're doing, particularly our new nurses,
Mhm.
because us old heads like me, we're used to doing certain things. And it's for us, it's common sense, but I think sometimes we don't teach this stuff. And I've been around some newer nurses, and I'm not bashing anyone, but I'm just saying that seem to think, well, I know it all because I went to XYZ, and I'm well, and I'm like, but there's things that you don't know,
Mhm.
so you have to be willing to ask questions and to learn.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always said. I'm like, the day that I feel like I know everything is the day I retire. Like,
Hmm.
because I'll never know everything. Even after 28 years, I'm still learning. Things are constantly evolving and changing. So you have to be open and ready to learn new things.
Yeah, it's so funny because I was talking to another nurse yesterday, and we were reminiscing about how we were trained because of some of the stuff that she's doing.
Mhm.
With keeping residents with urinary drainage bags safe. So she's developed a device to do that. And so she would say, how you were trained to wipe the end of the urinary drainage bag off with
Mhm.
alcohol wipe. Well, they don't do that anymore.
Mm-mm.
And I looked at it and I said, you're right, because I just taught a bunch of CNAs and I know the procedure, right? In the back of my head,
Mhm.
I did this for years. It's not on there anymore.
Oh. There
It's
you
not
go.
on there. And I'm thinking, why aren't we teaching these things anymore?
Hmm.
So, there's things that I learn every day too that may be
Yeah.
new, but we discussed that, and she's saying this is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of infections and things like that with Foley catheters. They've actually done the study. So that's
Hmm.
going to be coming out next week. She's going to finish her study and publish and everything. So I'm excited about that.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
but if you don't have that experience, how would you know to think about those things
Right.
if they're not being taught?
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing too, especially in our unit. I mean, I say this to the because I precept a lot, so I tell them all the time. I'm like, I give you guys a lot of credit to come from right out of nursing school into a pediatric intensive care unit is really difficult. There's
Mhm.
not only do you have to learn your basic, your basic assessments and skills. Now you have to learn how to, prime and run an epidrip and all the other just like critical things that happen quickly. Like, I mean, I just went in the other night and within a half hour we got an admission and we were on bypass, like we were on ECMO within an hour and a half
Wow.
of the patient rolling through the door. And and it was just like, okay. And the actual nurse that had that patient was on orientation with an experienced nurse, and I happened to be coming in extra. And they were like, "Oh, could you go help in there?" And then I wound up having to take the patient because even the bedside nurse who had been there for 2 years wasn't familiar with how to take care of a patient on ECMO. So it was a good learning experience for her. But that's the thing. I mean, these kids have very little. I mean, they have great reserve until they don't,
Right.
and then things move very quickly. So that's where, I mean, I could see her face and I just kept looking at her and I was like, it's okay. Like, this is okay. Like, everything that you're doing is okay. Even if you just stand there and watch, because at this point, like, this is so beyond you that it's okay to just kind of take it all in because it was a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't. You wouldn't expect a surgeon to just go right out of medical school and start cutting, right?
Right.
I hope not.
Exactly. I hope not. Right.
Right. So why do they, think nurses can just hop right in there? You've had the training, you've done your clinicals, but you need that time to learn the art of nursing. And I think
Mhm.
that's where a lot of people are forgetting that. And if you don't know, and you're expecting that you're going to have it all together and you're on the first day, and you don't, you often get disappointed and you feel bad about yourself, and then you don't have that, you have self-esteem issues. And I had this conversation with a nurse years ago, and she came into psychiatry,
Mhm.
and I said, I'm worried about you. You made a couple of mistakes. You're not listening to the senior nurses who are telling you what to do. And you're making poor choices with some of the patients. And she's like, well, I just think you guys just aren't close enough to the patients and all this stuff. And I think we should be, I said, you're not here to be the patient's friend.
Yeah.
I said, you're going to overstep some boundaries, which she ended up doing.
Oh
I said,
boy.
you might end up with a stalker because this person previously stalked his ex-girlfriend.
Oh.
And so I'm like, you're not making good decisions. And I think part of it is because you haven't dealt with your own stuff.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so when you have things like family members that had a lot of health issues, and you were always the caretaker, and then you have family members that had addiction issues and mental health issues, and then you come into that area, you're going to try to take care of your family member whether you know it or not. And so unless you deal with your own stuff,
Mhm.
it's going to be hard for you. It's the same thing with nurses that had sick children and now they want to work on the pediatric unit. If you
Mhm.
haven't dealt with that stuff at home,
Mhm.
go to your therapy, whatever you need to do, talk to your shaman, pray, meditate, whatever you need to do for you, you're going to carry that into that, and it's going to cloud some of your judgment. You'll
Absolutely.
have some great empathy for people, but you'll also have to be very careful not to project your own experience on
Mhm.
others.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so how did you then, because you've been in the PICU for quite a while, how did you go about to starting your company, Nurture the Nurse? How did this come about?
Well, it was year 25. Year 25 and the pandemic hit and I felt like I was in a box. I felt like I was I put myself in this little tiny box of, I'm just going to retire as a bedside nurse. I had no desire to go back to school. I didn't want to be a nurse practitioner. I at one point thought maybe like a nurse anesthetist, like
Hmm.
anesthesia. Um, but I have two teenage kids that are very involved in sports, and I'm like, the thought of being in a residency for 3 years, I was just like, it's just not. I didn't want it that bad. Like it wasn't like a passion thing, and I was like,
Right.
you know what? I'm not really sure what I need. Um, but I needed something. I wound up at that point in time. There was an opening for a managerial position on my unit, and I thought, okay, maybe that's it. I applied. I went through the whole process. It was a long story short. There was one manager who was a manager who they cut positions and took the position away and then reopened the position a year and a half later. I
Mm.
had asked her, I'm like, do you want the position? Because it's yours, like it was yours before. And she was like, no, I don't want it. And I was like, okay, so I'll apply. I wound up applying, going through the process because I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe just changing changing my perspective of being on the unit and how I can be supportive might be what I need. Um, well, wound up last minute, she changed her mind and applied for the position. And I was like, okay. But it was really funny because when they had called me, I had missed the call. And the first thing that came to my head was, how do I get out of this? Because I really don't want this position either. So again, I was on this quest where universe just show me what is for me. I wound up actually going into network marketing.
Hmm.
So I wound up selling vitamins
Hmm.
um, for a little bit. And that kind of took on its own little life. And that still does provide me some passive income, which is nice. And then the mentors from my vitamin company introduced me to a life coach, and
Okay.
that's where everything changed. So my life coach was Tracy Litt, and she had come up with a program called Mind Magic. I wound up doing Mind Magic, and I I want to say in a period of almost 2 years, it was the work of myself, and it was a lot of looking back and realizing a lot of the. I mean, and that's I think that's just in any kind of personal development, right?
Hmm.
All of your, like, a lot of us live in our past solely for the fact that that's all we know, right?
Right.
So a lot had come up. I did a lot of healing, and um I wound up actually rejuvenating my love for the job. So what beautifully also happened is when I didn't get the managerial position, I decided I was going to go part-time. And then I decided at that point, because my mentor created a certification for her program. And I said, I'm going to take this to nurses, because if it could change me after 25 years and rejuvenate this spark that I had lost, it's got to do wonders for people now, right? Who are burnt out and who are not knowing what they need or want. Um, so I did. I created. I opened up my own coaching company, Kruse into You, and then created the program Nurture the Nurse, based off of her program. And we do understanding trauma. We do subconscious reprogramming. Um, we do an inner child healing. We do future visualization, like future self visualization. So it's a beautiful gamut of, and then nervous system regulation, which I think is huge. And that has been one of the biggest shares for me. I think with my immediate circle is just the teaching, and with all the research that's coming out too of, living in these prolonged states of sympathetic nervous system, right? And this slow hum of fight or flight all the time. That's what's turning on these genetic switches for illness, right? Because of the
Right.
imbalance in our bodies. So just having that knowledge and being able to share that, and even in the moment, like in the moment, being able to grab someone who, I can tell is in overwhelm and stress, and being like, hey, can we have a moment to just go for a walk and talk, and actually give her tools like deep breathing or tapping or oming or whatever worked for her, to work in the moment to then prefrontal cortex comes back online, right? And then you're open and expansive, and then you can actually do what you're there to do. So to watch it work in real time is beautiful, you know, and then to be able to give them the practices to do once they leave, to not have this trauma kind of tack on a cellular level, because that's what happened to me after all of these years. And that was probably the biggest. I want to say it was like being hit in the head when my coach asked me, and she was like, you've had to make every situation okay for every patient and family member in all of your years. When are you going to stop making it okay for you? And it was like, whoa, there was so much that unpacked there. And it was like, okay, well, if we can help people regulate their nervous systems, then you actually provide better care because you're energetically aligned. And that's what I've noticed in helping nurses do it. They help parents do it, and then the parents interact differently with the sick kids, and they get better exponentially faster. Like, now my doctors are starting to notice that. They're like, why is it every single time you're on, number one, the unit is super calm? And I'm like, because I'm regulated. I regulate myself before I come in, and the ripple effect of me regulating my nervous system literally goes out to the entire unit. And then, when I'm talking to, because these are people's hearts on the outside. Like,
Mhm.
really, besides, a parent, I don't know of a closer relationship than a child. And the levels of stress, and that they're under, and then being able to give them tools to watch their energy. Just, okay, let's not plant all these crazy seeds in these crazy forests of things that aren't even true, and focus on what we want to focus on, which is the path to their wellness, and not all the muck in the middle. And it literally has helped. Like, I mean, I remember I had it was a 7-week old RS baby who's intubated with RSV. The nurse during the day, poor girl, was from the NICU, had just gotten back from maternity leave. So she was 4 months out of the unit, came back, her first day back, she gets floated to our unit and has this baby. So she's like, I don't even remember my passwords to sign on to the computer. Poor girl. So think of what her stress level was, now going to an unfamiliar place and then taking care of this critical baby. And when I get to her, I was like, hey, how are you? How was your day? And she was like, I can tell you right now that the baby's alive. And I've been in that room all day long. And I was like, okay, can we just tap a little and breathe a little before you go home? Because if you bring this to your baby is not going to sleep at all night. And you guys are going to have the worst night at home. I can tell you that right now. And she was like, okay. And then I went in and I was talking to the parents. And because she had been so stressed out, the parents were like two cats on a ceiling. Mom is at the bed, dad's pacing, and I was like, okay, can we just talk for a little bit? And they're like, sure. And I said to the nurse, and I was like, has this baby's heart rate been 175 all day? And she was like, yeah, Cindy, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know. We've tried. The baby's not like, the baby's not dehydrated. The baby doesn't have fever. We've tried sedation, all the things. I don't understand. And I was like, okay. Mom was at the bedside. I was like, can you guys just do me a favor and just do this? Just start tapping a little while we talk. And they were like, okay. And I'm like, tell me where you're at. Like, looking at your baby, where are you? And the mom was like, well, he's super sick. He's intubated. He's like 7 weeks old. We're gonna miss Christmas with our 3-year-old. Um, and the x-ray is only getting worse. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, number one, have you guys eaten today? And they had just gotten back from meeting. And I was like, okay. Number two, how much have you slept? And she was like, I've slept 4 hours in 4 days. Amazing.
Mhm.
So we got them a room to sleep in. But all I did was had my hand on the baby's belly and my hand on the baby's head, and we were talking. And I was just, yeah, I'm like, you guys just keep tapping. They're like, okay. So then I said, what would it feel like if we focused and put our attention on 3 days from now, when he's extubated, when you're holding him, x-rays better, you're on your way home? She was like, that would be amazing. And I'm like, okay, let's just keep our focus and attention on that. Literally, as we're sitting there, the baby's heart rate went down to 150. And then we're still talking, and we just kept doing some more, some deep breathing, blah, blah, blah. They wound up, they were going to go to sleep. By the time they went to sleep, the baby's heart rate was down to 135. No extra egg sedation, no extra anything. And my doctor was like, what did you do? And I'm like, I don't know, but we fixed the energy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think is, we're tapping into that a lot more. And then to be able to have that flow, right? Not just from the nurses, because if it's just one sided, it's just that much more beneficial, I think. And then even with the physicians, like, um, I started now, when we know we're having like a critical kid come in, I'm like, okay, let's get everything set up, and then I'm like, can we just do it? Let's just all stop and do our 90-second solution. And they're like, 90-second solution, and I'm like, 3 rounds of 4-7-8 breathing. And literally within 90 seconds, all of us went from here to here. And
Mm-hmm.
then the child rolls in, and everybody's got a role. Everybody knows their job. Everybody's focused, and everybody is, your prefrontal cortex is online. Your analytical mind is back on, and you're able to then do the job without the panic and the stress and the overwhelm. And it really does make a difference.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
I did a session with a group of women business leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and on a Saturday morning, right before lunch, I'm going up to do the wellness session, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I got 20 minutes, so we're going to talk about some quantum physics and quantum psychology. And their eyes are like, what? I said, yeah, all right. And so I said, we're going to talk about how to shift your mood by shifting your energy and your vibrations. And so I just used music, and I showed them how to shift their mood on their own just by using music, so they can understand and tie it to something that it's universal to everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to take them very low, low, and then take them very high, high. So by the end of it, right before lunch, we're up dancing and laughing.
That's amazing.
So I get it. It's taking that 60 seconds to take a deep breath. And it's something that I do if I know I'm getting ready to walk into a difficult session.
Mm-hmm.
I may pull out some aromatherapy for myself, or I'll take a walk, I'll do some deep breathing, I'll get a glass of water, I'll do something to separate myself from that,
Mm-hmm.
and then put myself back into the mindset. Okay, all right, we're here, we're able to handle the onslaught of emotion I know that's going to come towards me at this moment, but we're going to help them move through this and calm things down and be prepared. And the session goes a whole lot better,
Mm-hmm.
because when they're coming in and they're frantic like that with me, yeah, I'm like, "Oh, okay, well,
Exactly.
I can't listen to anything you have to say because you're yelling, you're stressed out." I said, so let's take some deep breaths. And then they're like, yeah, but I said, okay, well, here, sniff this. I give them some lavender. Smell that. And they're like, yeah, but no. We're sniffing lavender right now. We're not talking.
Yeah.
We're doing that. And so by the time we take 5 minutes to do that, then I can have a better conversation with them. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're coming at me like, it's never, you're not going to hear what I have to say. You're going to
Exactly.
miss critical information, and then you're going to leave even more agitated. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
let's deal with this so that you're more receptive, right,
Exactly.
to healing. And so those are some of the little tricks that I sneak in there in
Right.
some of my sessions, because I'm like, hey, we gotta bring this down a little bit so that you're in a better place to remember what I just said. And I had a particular client that I was always make her repeat what I said 3 times,
There
because
you
that's
go.
the only way it would stick with her. I said, now what
Mm-hmm.
did I just tell you? I'm going to take this medication in the morning. Okay. And how much is it? It's 5 milligrams. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, what did I just say? Take the 5 milligram of this in the morning, because she'll forget. She'll say, you didn't tell me. I'm like, no, no, no. We went over this. And then I'm going to hand you a piece of paper that says the same thing. But we
Right.
went over this. You can remember, because she was always so anxious when she'd come in, and she'd start out with yelling, and some of the other prescribers would be like, oh, do you need help? I said, no, she's processing.
Yeah.
She's processing. I
Exactly.
know how to deal with her. I said, and I tell her, I get really quiet. I said, now you're not listening.
Mm-hmm.
You're not listening. You're talking when I'm talking. And then she said, okay, okay, okay. I said,
Right.
now what did I just say? Okay, we're going to do, yes, we're going to do that. You know, so, and it helps bring her down.
Mhm. Well, there's just that power of the pause.
Hmm.
I mean, and that's in just everyday relationships. You know what I mean? Like even when I've noticed that's been huge with my kids, that just that power of the pause where it's like, you're responsive instead of reactive.
Yes.
You have that moment of perspective, right? And then that really changes because honestly, with everything, and that was probably one of the biggest shifts that happened. Um, there was one of the newer nurses had asked me, we had a staff meeting. This was during COVID. And I don't know if this happened like across the country, but the pediatric ICU was very slow
Hmm.
because kids weren't getting COVID because they were out of school. So the pandemic really hit more adults. It hit kids later on with this like post COVID like multi system organ failure. But
Hmm.
initially, so we were very slow. So we were getting furloughed one day. So I was getting paid full time, but working 2 days a week. And they wound up bringing clean ASHU patients into our unit, and then we were just like helpers.
Hmm.
But it's just funny because one of the newer nurses came over to me and she was like, you know, complaining about the meeting and this and that they're doing this to us and this and that. And it was one complaint after another complaint after another complaint. She was like, Cindy, what's your opinion on this? And I was like, I'm grateful. And she was like, what? And I was like, I mean, I'm grateful, number one, that I'm not getting exposed to patients with COVID, right?
Hmm.
Number
Yep.
two, like we're getting paid full time and working part time. Number three, we're just helpers. We're getting paid like nurses, but we're actually just working like techs. And she was like, I never really thought about it like that. And I was like, okay, now go back and tell your friends because there's this whole, flurry of people that were all like
Hmm.
this and this and this. And I'm like, just pause for a second
Yep.
and really look at the big picture of it all and just changing that, just that, perspective change. It changes how you receive things as well. And that's where it's like, I mean, a lot of the things that are going on now, we can't, they're it's like government. We can't control it, but we can
Exactly.
control how we react to it.
Yes.
And if truly my passion for the job is to take care of a patient, then the other stuff just is, I'm going to leave that right there, is the other
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
And I
Exactly.
don't take it home with me. And I don't, so it really, and it's funny because like I can sense it. You can sense like there's certain people when I come on the unit that are like, oh gosh, here she comes again. And I'm like, take it or leave it. I really don't care. This is it. This is it
Hmm.
for me. Like, so if anything, it's like I want to be that ripple effect. I want people to realize like you really, a lot of the burnout there is anxiety. A lot of the burnout is us getting in our own way. A lot of the burnout is pulling up old trauma that is in our cells that needs to be processed and then released,
Yeah.
and reconnecting to your body, right? So much of our, I mean, we, and just back to that, we are all just spiritual energetic beings in these human bodies, right? And then
Hmm.
going back to that, like we're all energy and we're all bumping energies. So to have frenetic energy bumping into frenetic energy, then going into a patient's room who's already immunocompromised, you're not doing that patient any good.
No, no, not at all. So when you've got your program out, how
Mhm.
would someone, if they wanted to get in touch with you and learn about your program, how would they do so?
I do have a Calendly link, and I also have a website. Um, the,
And what's your website?
the website is cruseintoyou.com, and it's KRUSEINTOYOU.com.
Awesome, awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, and so my last question to you, as we're wrapping up our time here, if you had a piece of advice for a budding entrepreneur, what would it be?
Be your authentic true self. You can't deny that. And really don't other people's opinions of you is none of your business.
Yes.
And really just be your true authentic self. Speak from your soul, and you can't be wrong. Like, you can never get it wrong, and you're never going to be done, because we're just constantly evolving. So, and then just realize fear is just fear of the unknown. And it's actually a good thing. You need to embrace the fear, because then the fear means you're at a growth edge. So if you think of it in that perspective, it's like, bring it on.
It's learning to change your perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, that's our show for today. I want to thank you all for tuning in to the Nurse Shark Academy show. Again, I'm Tina Baxter. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, to give us a like, subscribe, and if you want to become a patron of our show on our Podbean account, you can become a patron, and we'll have special episodes for our patrons, including some special guests with expertise in business that can help you make your business grow further. If you're listening to us on Podbean or wherever you get your podcast, please leave us a comment and a like. We appreciate everything that you do for us. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Ready to turn your nursing skills into a thriving business? At the Nurse Shark Academy, we give you expert strategies, real startup guidance, and the support to go from employee to empowered entrepreneur. Join us and build the nurse-owned business of your dreams. Start today and join us at thenursesharkacademy.biz. Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the thenursesharkacademy.biz.